Let's freaking go! Woo! Let's go. Let's go where? To the playoffs, baby! Yeah! What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken have ended the drought, 2-year drought, but they're headed to the playoffs, officially stamping their ticket with the second win over the Coyotes in 4-5 nights. And that was the goal going into the night, where the job was simple. Win and you're in. But also going in with the Nashville game still happening, had Nashville lost that game, whether regulation or overtime, the Kraken could still clinch with an overtime loss against the Coyotes. And while it still would have been sweet to have the Kraken clinch a playoff berth at home, it did feel nice to have them actually do it with a win and not an overtime loss to a bad team. They do it the right way with a convincing 4-2 victory. I mean, honestly, the only way this could have been any better was if this win had been against, let's say, Vancouver and come on an overtime or last-second buzzer-beater game-winning goal that came off of a Tyler Myers turnover. But I'll happily take the home win, and boy, was this crowd in it from the absolute moment, honestly, the crowd entered the doors. It didn't even take the puck dropping for this to really feel like it had the energy of a home crowd that wanted this win and wanted to see this team clinch the playoffs in front of them. Okay, I guess if I did have one maybe small complaint, you're killing me with the 7:30 start. It's already late enough when I start recording these videos after a 7 o'clock start at home. But it was worth the extra half an hour. Although I suppose since we're on the subject of a perfect world for this win, it does seem a bit criminal that Forsland didn't get to be on the call for it, as this was an ESPN Plus game. But at least Everett Fitzhugh did a fantastic job with the radio call at the end, and if you haven't gotten a chance to hear that, it is on the Kraken Audio Network Twitter feed, or I retweeted it, so you should be able to find it on mine if you follow me there. Either way, it's out there, and I would recommend listening to it if you haven't. But I mean, come on, what are we even doing here? It's all about positivity and partying it up for this first ever playoff berth for the Kraken in their second year of existence, further building off of being the best second-year team in NHL history. And yes, I know there's probably going to be some fans of some other teams around the league that might be a bit miffed by the fact that another expansion team is good in their second season. I mean, at least they weren't good in the first season, so you got that reprieve for a little bit. But now, both of these new expansion teams back in the playoffs again after 1 year off. And to be fair, I can understand that frustration from the perspective of, say, a Buffalo Sabres fan who has now seen 2 franchises enter the league and make the playoffs while they're still waiting for their next chance. But the idea that Seattle fans haven't suffered enough and gone through the true expansion process, well, as far as suffering is concerned, we're also Mariners fans and just got past a 21-year playoff drought, so we kind of know what that's like. As far as hockey's concerned, well, you could look at it as the Kraken making it after just 1 year of not in the playoffs, or you could look at it as Seattle's getting their first playoff hockey with the Stanley Cup at the end of it in 99 years since the Metropolitans had their last chance. So, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, Seattle hockey fans have paid their dues, if not by watching their NHL team not make the playoffs for a long time, by just not having one in the first place for way too long. And now, 2 years in, we're finally getting to watch NHL playoff hockey for the first time. So then, with the playoff ticket punched for the Kraken, the focus now shifts, at least as far as fans are concerned, to, well, for one, finishing the season on a good note and going into the playoffs on a bit of a roll, but also who the Kraken are going to play and how that first round could end up going. A first round that I think most people outside of Seattle anyway are going to look at the Kraken as an underdog, which is probably fair. They're most likely going to face a division winner, or if not, one of Vegas or Edmonton. But with that having been said, these are the NHL playoffs we're talking about, and for those that are new, unlike, say, the NBA, for example, in the NHL playoffs, anything can happen. Besides, for the Kraken part in all this, well, they've just spent an entire season proving everybody wrong, so I see no reason for that to stop now. And since we're on the subject and can finally now start talking about the playoffs, knowing that the Kraken are going there, we might as well take another look at which team the Kraken are most likely to face in that first round. Where, honestly, since the last time we talked about it, which wasn't all that long ago, not a lot has changed. it is still most likely the Kraken end up in the spot they're in right now, that first wild card in the Western Conference, which is much more likely than not going to face the winner of the Central Division, as although it's still possible, it's pretty unlikely that the winner of the Central will pass the winner of the Pacific. As far as which one of the three teams in the Central could get that, well, between the Avalanche, Stars, and Wild, it could still easily be any one of the three. But if I had to put money on it at this point, it looks like it's going to be the Avalanche. Which, I have to say, as someone that cheered for the Avalanche up until 2 years ago, not terribly excited about that matchup in the first round. I mean, yes, it does guarantee that one of my two favorite teams, with the Kraken being far and away the first just to get things clear, would make it to the second round, but even outside of the fact that it would mean the Kraken facing McKinnon and Makar and the rest of that Avalanche lineup, or at least whichever ones of them are healthy anyway, it would also mean that there's now a guaranteed 4 to 7 game series worth of potential reasons to not like a team that I've really liked up until now. And I don't want reasons to not like the Avalanche. Of course, though, from a purely Kraken standpoint, the Kraken did fare pretty well against the Avalanche over the course of the season, going 2-0-1 against them in the 3 games they played. So, for whatever reason, they seem to match up well against the defending champs, and if that carries over into the playoffs, then there's a fair chance they could end up getting out of that first round. Then there's the other two teams in the Wild and Stars, both of whom the Kraken had fairly even 3-game series against, with each of the Stars and Wild coming out on top of the Kraken just slightly, but both of those could turn out to be pretty good series as well. Though with those two, there is a little bit of a concern when it comes to the goaltender matchup, not just in that Grubauer has played noticeably better against the Avalanche than just about any other team, but also, and maybe more so, at the opponent end of the ice, where whether it's Marc-Andre Fleury for the Wild or Jake Ottinger for the Stars, both of them have shown, whether it's in one run in the case of Ottinger or a number of runs, including a few Stanley Cups in the case of Marc-Andre Fleury, both are very capable of taking over not just one series, but an entire playoff run. Well, Ottinger hasn't had the full playoff run yet, but he has been very good in what playoffs he has played in. Regardless of which one of the three it ends up being, though, at this point there's nothing the Kraken can do about it other than watch from the outside and see which one ends up winning that division. Of the three then, if it was up to me, I'd probably pick the Stars, again because the Avalanche I'd just rather not be that first round matchup, especially because they are the hottest of the three right now, which is scary in its own right. But also because with the Wild, I'm just kind of more scared of Marc-Andre Fleury and what his experience could end up doing. Plus, he's done very well against the Kraken whenever he has faced them, which certainly isn't to say that I think the Stars are an easy matchup. None of the three are, and honestly, no matchup in the playoffs is an easy one. Just ask the 2021 Maple Leafs or the 2019 Lightning. Yanni Gourde having first-hand experience with that specific one. Those three aside, though, there still is a chance, not a huge one, but a chance that the Kraken could end up jumping the Kings and getting back into that third spot in the Pacific, in which case they get either the Oilers, who are the hottest team in the NHL at the moment, maybe aside from the Bruins, but even there, I think they're probably hotter than the Bruins, which is saying something, and the Golden Knights, which would be a pretty fun matchup, but certainly not one that I would be excited about either. Of course, though, again, for the Kraken to face either of those two, they would still have to jump the Kings, who they're currently 4 points behind with 1 game in hand. So if the Kraken continue to win, especially if they were to win out and the Kings stumble their way through their last few games, it's definitely possible, but not likely, and honestly, I'm okay with that, as I'd kind of rather the Kraken face one of the teams in the Central, whoever ends up winning it, than either of the Oilers or Golden Knights. Of course, if the Kraken go on a deep run, they may have to face one of those two anyway, but cross that bridge when you get to it. Yes, I suppose it's still technically possible that the Kraken could end up as the second wildcard team if they were to lose out and Winnipeg was to win out, but that doesn't seem terribly likely, so I think we can say that that's not going to happen. Also, technically possible that they could jump both the Kings and Edmonton to end up the second seed, but that's almost as likely. With all of that, though, there still is a game that happened that we should probably get to, especially considering it's getting later and later, and my train of thought is staying on the rails about as well as if it were going through Ohio at the moment, so we should probably get into the game. Now, like I said in the beginning, you could feel the energy in the crowd and in the building in this game from well before puck dropped, at least by the time they were announcing the starting lineup for the Kraken. And boy, were they given a chance to absolutely blow the roof off of the building, a roof that the city worked very hard to make sure was not blown off or damaged in any way when the building was built in the first place. But the Kraken nearly score right in the first few seconds of this game, pushing immediately off the faceoff. The puck bounces around the net, but just doesn't quite find a Kraken stick at the right time. The Coyotes survive that, and then for a while in this first period, it's just kind of up and down the ice, as the Kraken were certainly getting the much better of the shots on goal and scoring chances, but kind of felt like they were, I don't know, almost a little bit, well, it kind of felt like they were, I don't know, toying with the Coyotes, but not in the way that they were taking a big lead like the last time, more in the way that they felt like they should be taking a big lead and then just kind of sloppy allowing things to go back the other way, recovering at the last second to make sure Grubauer wasn't facing any particularly dangerous shots, but definitely allowing chances that a better team, let's say a team they'll face in the playoffs, definitely could have taken advantage of and potentially scored on. Fortunately for the Kraken, though, the Coyotes are not a better team, and honestly, outside of their first line and maybe one or two other guys here and there, they're basically an AHL team, so they did not have the talent, at least not on the ice at the times they needed it, to take advantage of those Kraken mistakes that, again, could bite them if they continue to play this type of careless hockey that's very much just focused on trying to get the best chance they can in the offensive end and not too worried about the defense the other way, which we saw bite them in the butt all too often last season, and we'll have to hope that they get that cleaned up at least by the time the playoffs start. I don't know, maybe that sounds a little overcritical on a night like this one, and again against a team like the Coyotes, but it also could be a little bit more excusable if the Kraken were actually scoring on the opportunities they were creating in the offensive end, which they weren't and continue to not do so, even with a couple of very good opportunities on a power play that they get late here in the first. Again, a very good power play that nearly made it 5 games in a row that the Kraken had scored on the power play, but they end up coming up empty this time. And so, as we close into the final seconds of this first period, still scoreless, although, again, the energy in the building felt like really since before the game started that this one was never in doubt. On the scoreboard, it's still scoreless, and we're getting very close to that being the case at the end of one, and the deeper you go into a game, the more and more one fluky goal could make the difference. But happily, as we enter the final 30 seconds of the period, whatever small amount of doubt might have been starting to sneak in a little bit is pushed aside, at least for the time being anyway, as the first line, getting into the offensive end, gets one more very good scoring chance as Beniers wins a battle behind the boards between two Arizona players, gets that puck up to Eberle next to the net. Eberle makes a quick move up to the front of the net and then passes it out to the other side where McCann's coming in, and McCann puts it into the net to give the Kraken the late first period 1-0 lead. This first line, which had already been denied a couple of times to this point in the period, finally gets the Kraken on the board, and they're just off and running. Well, I guess if you want to get technical, walking to the locker room as the first period comes to an end, but they're running away with it on the scoreboard as just seconds later in game time, there's less than a minute separating the two by game clock, but there is about 20 minutes of intermission. Either way, 28 seconds into the second period, Vince Dunn fires off a shot from up by the blue line that gets through everybody and then just squeaks over Vejmelka as it rolls along his stick and then falls behind him. One of his defensemen who's right next to the net sees it leak through him and then tries to shove it out the other side, but doesn't quite get enough of it, and instead shoves it into the post on the far side, and it bounces off that post into the net to give the Kraken the 2-0 lead, and Vince Dunn, what was originally assisted by Tolvanen and Gord, ends up being an unassisted goal. So now we're certainly feeling much better about things with a multi-goal lead. but that is tested immediately afterwards as the Kraken send the Coyotes to a power play, which they do a good job of killing off, and then not long after they do, once again, that Beniers line is out there, and this time it's McCann with the good checking play along the boards to get a hold of the puck and just send it out net front, where the only guy within a country mile of the net outside of Vejmelka is Jordan Eberle, as this puck just kept seeming to find him, and really has over the last few games, alone in front of the opponent net. Eberle makes no mistake of making this game 3-0 just a few minutes into the second period. So now, and there's really no way around it, the scoreboard does look the way you would like it to, and this game pretty much feels over. With that having been said, it kind of seemed like the Kraken felt like it was over, as they really didn't show much urgency to press to continue to extend this lead and really put it out of reach like they did in the previous matchup, which I suppose they kind of waited until the third period to do that. But again, some of this lackadaisical play starts to sneak in a bit, and eventually that leads to a not an odd man rush, but a rush chance into the Kraken end of the ice. And for what it's worth, although the Coyotes have really been going through it over the last, few years, let's face it, and this team is not very good right now, they do have some good young talent coming up and just an absolute crap ton of draft picks. One of those young guys is going to be a finalist for the Calder. I mean, Beniers is still going to win it, but Matias Maccelli is certainly going to be a finalist, at least to me, he certainly is anyway. And he shows why with a beautiful pass. He does fan on the pass on the forehand to try and get it out to the side for what would have been a good chance at a goal with a shot. But just when everyone else seemed to think that the play was over with that fanning of the pass, Maccelli, as he passes the puck, instead just backhands the puck behind his back and out to the same place he was going to put it with the forehand pass, and then it does go into the back of the net. He picks up another assist as Beniers, with an assist on the first goal, got a little bit closer to him for that rookie lead in assists, and Maccelli, once again, like he did in the first meeting between these two teams, answers a Beniers assist with an assist of his own to keep Beniers at bay, at least for the assist total. Beniers still way ahead in points and goals, but Maccelli, just a fantastic pass here to recover from a not so fantastic one, or attempt at one anyway. The point being that the future for the Coyotes seems to be a pretty bright one. Whether that's in Arizona or somewhere else still is a little bit up in the air. It seems like it'll probably be in Tempe, but it's just one thing after another with this franchise, off the ice, but on the ice, yeah, there's a lot of good young talent, and Maccelli is certainly part of that. The present, however, still pretty ugly for the Coyotes, and that is definitely drilled home when, to start the third period, although the two teams trade power plays throughout the rest of the second, neither one score on them. At the start of the third, it's once again the first line for the Kraken that are going to put this game pretty much out of reach, as McCann in the Kraken end starts the breakout by getting the puck up to Eberle just inside the neutral zone, and Eberle does not take long at all to find Beniers on a totally free breakaway. Beniers skates in and buries it to get his 22nd of the season and put the Kraken up 4-1 just a couple minutes into the third. And although, once again, the Kraken get a little bit sloppy throughout the rest of this third period, allowing, not long after this, back-to-back rush chances of 4 or 5-on-1 and then a 3-on-1, which prompts a timeout from Haxtell to tell the guys to really kind of get their crap together for the last few minutes and just ice this one away. Seems to work as the Kraken are able to do that. Thankfully, Grubauer was able to come up with a couple of pretty big saves on those two chances for the Coyotes to keep the score 4-1. And then that is not actually how the game would finish. No, this game, as you would have seen at the beginning, ends 4-2. And this is where I do have to come clean about something, just to be perfectly honest. As a part of the gig covering this team, I do spend some time on the mistakes that they make, especially when it comes to letting up goals like they do here in the final minute of a game where they're clinching a playoff spot. Well, I could be critical about the fact that they leave someone completely forgotten about on the back door who a pass gets to, and then he has an easy goal that kind of stunts the celebration of clinching the playoffs a little bit. I don't really feel like I can be too critical of this second goal the Kraken allow in good faith, as, to be, again, perfectly honest, I had no idea this goal even happened until I was at home watching the highlights of the game to put together the screenshots for this video. To be honest, I was more just taking in the atmosphere of the building and watching the crowd enjoy the last few seconds of this game. And so, although as someone who was covering the game, you'd think that I should probably know what the final score of the game was before over an hour after it was over, especially considering it was on the scoreboards, announced in the arena and all that. Again, I just got caught up in those final seconds ticking off of the clock to really even realize that a goal had been scored. I did remember thinking it was a little bit weird that they did a face-off at center ice after a stoppage in the Kraken end, but I guess I didn't think anything of it past that. Still, I think it was worth just enjoying those final seconds and the slow build of the crowd into just a deafening roar as they appreciated what this team has done to get to this point of clinching a playoff spot in their second season. Oh boy. I had to check because I was taking a video to get the crowd reaction to the Kraken clinching the playoffs. And, well, sure enough, I even got a video of that goal going in and still somehow didn't realize that it happened until I was watching the highlights at home. But there you go. And I would show that video just to drive the point home even more of how dumb of a mistake I guess I made here. But because of copyright reasons, I can't do that without getting demonetized and all that stuff. So we're not going to do that. But yeah, everyone makes mistakes. But even with some mistakes here and there have been a lot more good moments over the course of this season. And all of that has led to a playoff berth in the second year for the Kraken. Before we move on, though, to the Kraken 3 stars and then the final 4 games of the season and finding out who the Kraken will play in that first round, it is also certainly worth mentioning, especially because the Kraken still play this team one more time here in the next few days, that this game ended in a very similar fashion to how the last one against the Coyotes ended just a couple days ago. That being a couple more fights, a couple more misconducts on the part of the Coyotes, with 5 in total in just 3 days, or 4 days, or whatever it was, and just a really weird amount of bad blood between two teams that really have no reason to dislike each other than, I guess, playing a couple games against each other. Although, even before that bad blood boils over into how this game finishes, there was some actual blood that ends up on the ice, as Wennberg, shortly after the Beniers goal, in fact, I think just within seconds of the Beniers goal to make it 4-1, gets hit in the side of the head by a puck, and I really hope that he's okay, not only because he's a very important part of this team defensively. He's had a fantastic season in the defensive end for the Kraken, and has been a big part of the turnaround of this penalty kill in the back half of the year, but also because this looked bad. Definitely a fair amount of blood coming out of the side of his head. Sure, he needed stitches, didn't return to the game, and we'll just have to wait and see. I would imagine he's fine by the playoffs, probably just needs some stitches, but any puck to the head like that and blood coming out of the head obviously isn't a good thing. But eventually, as we get later on into this third period, just like has happened in the last game, although it happened later in this one because the Kraken didn't do as much scoring in the third period as they did in the last game against the Coyotes, once this score seemed like it was fully out of hand as it got later into the third, and the comeback just wasn't in the cards, the Coyotes, being the sore losers that they apparently are, resort to violence. That having been said, I do think things might have been set off a little bit by a big hit, a clean hit, but a big hit that Borgen lays along the boards going into the Kraken end, which probably was a bit unnecessary at that point in the game, even if it was a clean hit. Either way, it ends up leading to a fight behind the Arizona net, as one of the Arizona players who wasn't too happy about the Kraken laying a big hit on his teammate ends up going after Tanev, which Tanev doesn't back down. That turns into a fight. Tanev wins that. They did end up going to the ice, then bouncing back up and continuing to fight, as the officials in this game were pretty slow to stop the fights, as we'll find out with another one that comes up here in a bit. Still, the Kraken end up with a power play out of that on I think it was an instigator call that was called here, as that guy gets a misconduct and is kicked out. So anyway, Tanev to the box for fighting. That guy goes for a misconduct as well as an instigator call. Kraken to the power play. On said power play, Gord takes a stick to the face. No call is made for a 5-on-3, which the fans were not happy about, but gave them another chance to be loud, this time letting the officials know that they, in fact, suck. Otherwise, I thought they did a fine job. I mean, don't get me wrong, they absolutely missed a blatantly obvious high stick here on Gord, But in the next scrum that happens, I think they got everything right for what it's worth, where there's more pushing and shoving, another battle along the boards, and then I don't know if it's the same guy that Borgen hit. It's O'Brien this time, so if it was O'Brien that Borgen hit, I guess it was the same guy. But as there's a scrum happening, Borgen's looking the other way. O'Brien comes in behind the whole group of players and Borgen and just starts wailing on the back of Borgen's head. Gets a couple of punches in, maybe not super hard ones as he had a couple guys in between him. Borgen turns around, grabs his jersey, and it takes a while as Alexiak was trying to separate the two, and then a linesman was trying to separate the two of them. Eventually, they're not having it, so they let them go. Again, they hit the ice and bounce up before the officials can get involved, and eventually I think Borgen gets the better of this fight. But either way, once again, it's just more childish crap from the Coyotes, as they just can't seem to accept that they're the worst team, even though it should be obvious by how many times they've lost this season. Either way, another misconduct. That guy ends up leaving as well. The refs get everything that happens there, I think, sorted out correctly. The Kraken end up with another power play out of it as a result. They don't score on it, just kill off 2 minutes, and then, well, we already talked about how the game ended. And with that, since it's probably obvious at this point that I'm starting to fade fast, it is, well, it's no longer getting late, it's getting early. Let's get to the Kraken 3 stars, where I'm not going to argue with the 3 stars officially. Eberle's getting the first star. He could have easily had a hat trick in this game. He ends up with a goal and 2 assists. McCann gets the second star, a goal and 2 assists of his own. Definitely could have added another one. And Beniers, who himself could have had a multi-goal game, gets a goal and an assist rather than 2. He doesn't end up getting an assist on the Eberle goal. That's the only one he doesn't contribute on. But that first line was by far and away the best 3 players on the ice in this game. And it shows when you look at the advanced stats. I mean, honestly, it was kind of a middling game for most of the Kraken players as far as advanced stats are concerned. But those 3, as well as Vince Dunn, had a fantastic night. And honestly, I think Grubauer gets a bit undersold by stats in this one. He ends up letting in 2 goals, but he looked calm all night. And that really the calmest game I can remember him having as a Kraken. He's had other games where he's been great, making a lot of saves, but that tends to be a lot of going out and attacking the puck to make those saves. He seems, again, calm, just kind of the word to describe him, just really composed and didn't seem overwhelmed by anything happening in front of him, even when the Kraken had that bout of giving up 4, 5, 3-man breakaways towards him. Anyway, all that to say, the Beniers line, all 3 of them get the stars, and then Dunn and Grubauer are honorable mentions. With that, it is definitely time to call it for this one. I absolutely need to be getting to sleep. So let me know what you thought about this game down in the comment section below. I mean, just turn it into a party down there, clinching the playoffs. I don't know what else to say. This was an incredible game, I'm sure, to watch on TV, even if, again, it would have been nice if Forsland could have been on the call for it. But especially if you were lucky enough to be in the arena for this one. And either way, we've got 4 more games this season, and then bonus hockey in the postseason. So with that, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching and sticking with some of my senseless rambling here towards the end. There are buttons down below if you like to enjoy this video. Stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.